again, my last video cut off after 30 minutes, so I'm just going to start over, or I'm just going to start a new one, and mainly talk about the SCTS 4.0 rubric and how I will implement that into my lessons, since it's hard to tell everything since I don't have students. Starting out with standards and objectives, I have my I can statement written out on the board. And at the beginning of the class and at the end of the class, I would have the whole class just kind of say that. And this is kind of what's going to drive my lessons so that the students know the motives, the activities, and accomplishments of Jean Ribault and the French exploration and everything that happened. I can know the mastery of this mainly by the exit slip is a good one to talk about his accomplishments, because he did not make a settlement, he did not accomplish that. And then in order to talk about his accomplishments, students kind of have to talk about his activities and motives, so I can get a general gist of what they're saying. Also, the notebook page is perfect because there's one question about the motives, activities, and accomplishments. So that's great for them to be able to have, for me to see how they're doing. And then, of course, also their activity, the fun little activity that they'll do at the end, I'll be able to tell at least some of these how they're doing. And this is, again, something I would have up the whole lesson that I can say at the beginning and the end. I tried to make my expectations clear for the students when they're on the rug and working with partners, so hopefully that was good. Motivating students, I try to make this lesson really interactive. I think Social Weekly does a great job of telling the story of Jean Ribault, and then I just did that and added in some different pictures and maps and a little bit more to make it more interesting and just to give the students some visuals. So I think that was really good. And I also tried to pause a couple times in there. I didn't want to disrupt the flow of the story too much, just to ask some questions and let the students give some feedback. Also, if I did have real students, it would probably be more back and forth, especially since I would read a little bit, stop and look at the PowerPoint, go back and read, so the students would have chances to jump in and say something. So I think that would help them talk. And if I noticed they were really talking a lot, I could always do a tone and talk to your partner so everyone gets to say something. Yeah, another thing I would want to do is when students are working independently on the notebook pages or the activities, just to give them constructive feedback, let them know exactly what they're doing right or if they need some help, but give them lots of positive affirmations that they feel like they're doing the right thing. For the exit slip, I mainly just want to leave them alone for that, so I know exactly what they know and it's not any of my input. For presenting instructional content, of course the PowerPoint has tons of visuals, and that's one reason I wanted to supplement or use that with the Social Weekly, and I think that was really helpful. And then I have my, sorry I have so many papers, I have my map of kind of where Jean Ribault went, and France to South Carolina, so the students can see how long the journey was that he had to go on, and he did it twice because he went there and back. Also, I think one of the biggest things is just because I was telling the story, going back to the PowerPoint, making sure it was concise, getting to the point, telling all the details I need to hit, while also making it interesting and engaging and not making it last forever. And I think I did a fairly good job of that, just because it was so well organized and put together. And then, yeah, I also tried to give them examples of what to do with this and for their activities and make that brief and short so they know what to do with that. For the lesson pacing and structure, the goal of this lesson was the hook would take about 5 minutes, and I would ask them the question, they would discuss it, and then give me a little bit of feedback. The mini lesson, where I tell the story and use the PowerPoint, would be about 15 minutes. Then they would have 15 minutes to work independently, so to complete their exit slip and map. If they had time, they could work on the activity. This was mainly kind of like an extension and head start for tomorrow's lesson, because in tomorrow's lesson we would probably finish this and have the students actually present it to the whole class. And then I also gave them about 5 or so minutes to complete the exit slip, clean up, and get ready for transition to dismissal. I tried to make it as normal as possible, like playing the 1-minute transition song, saying the word of the day. Here, I think I only had a 17-second transition. I'd probably do a full 1 minute in the actual lesson just to give the students more time to talk and clean up and everything that they need. But for the sake, I just didn't want to take that time. And activities and materials. So I had my PowerPoint, I had my whiteboard with the I can statement. If I were in class, I could use this to make a lot more notes, but I had everything pretty much printed out so I could do it by hand. I had the social weekly story. Students would have the social studies notebooks, and then the notebook pages and the map. I would have the students be able to use the South Carolina Adventure textbook, which I do not have with me, but that's an additional material. I have the printed map that the students can highlight. And then my activities are pretty basic. I told the story with the PowerPoint, and let the students interact with that a little bit. There was also my hook at the beginning where I asked the students a question and they got to turn and talk. And then they did their notebook page with their shoulder partner or table group, depending on each group. And of course, they also had the fun activities that they could do at the end. That was probably the most exciting part of this lesson. And I think that the students would really enjoy in the next lesson since they already know a lot about Jean Ribault. I used, on my paper here, I have some links to some additional online resources I used to look up about Jean Ribault, just so I could get more information outside the textbook and standards and social weekly. For questioning, I think I talked about this pretty good, but I had a couple of knowledge and comprehension questions, a couple of application analysis, and a couple of creation and evaluation. And I think during my lesson I asked a couple, mainly about Jean Ribault's decision to go back or to stay, and I had the children imagine if they were on the boat by themselves and they were so hungry and they had to eat their shoes. A lot of the questioning, I think, would happen during the independent practice when I'm with students one-on-one. So more of my creation and evaluation questions like, why did the French have to make a hard decision that some men would stay and some would return to France? Or what could the French have done differently in order to make a successful settlement at South Carolina? I could have asked these to my higher achieving students, students maybe like Tanner, Kylie, Jaden F., Megan, Araya. Some of those students that would be able to handle, that would be able to get done with their notebook page fairly quick and would be able to handle the higher level thinking. And then, of course, a lot of knowledge and comprehension questions. I had a couple written down, like, who are the Huguenots? Where's Jean Ribault from? A lot of those would probably just come to mind as I'm teaching the lesson. What did you listen? What did you hear? What do you know now? Just different simple questions back and forth that I can ask the student. And those would be varied among all the students. Though I want to ask higher order thinking questions to all the students, so those would be at the top of my mind. And if it comes up, I would definitely throw that at them and be like, hey, what do you think would happen if this? What if Jean Ribault just stayed in South Carolina? What would happen? Okay, so then for academic feedback, a lot of this will happen when I see the papers. I would do a notebook check probably that evening and just take out the students' notebooks and just look at them real quick to see how they did. Excuse me. And then also the exit slip is really valuable information because for this they didn't have any materials, any resources that had come straight from their brain. So I would definitely take a look at that. Try to make some notes. I would love to, on each student's paper, make just a quick note if they got something really great out of the lesson that maybe I mentioned but didn't make a big deal out of. I can be like, wow, thanks for your attention to detail. I'm glad you heard that. Or even if they got one of the motives or one of the I can statement things correct, then I can be like, wow, I'm really glad you were listening to our I can statement, and it seems like you know a lot about the accomplishments of Jean Ribault. Just different things like this. Write like a little note and put a little smiley face on their paper that they can see the next day or the next whenever I give them the papers back. Also, of course, when they're working on the notebook pages, if a couple students had a question, I can just talk with them individually. If I notice a lot of students are struggling with something, then that's when I would ring the chimes, bring the whole class back together, and be like, okay guys, I notice a lot of you guys have a question about who the Huguenots are and what they did. And then I can, as a whole class, get their attention, explain that, and then dismiss them. So I don't have to say it to every table group or every partner group. The notebook page I feel like is pretty straightforward, especially since I have all the stuff from the story up there, and then I have the maps and this little information that's just pretty much taken straight from the notebook pages. So they should be able to do that, but I can also, all my students are at different levels, and I have some that will do that no problem, and some that it'll be a struggle for. So I'll make sure to give them the feedback that they need. Also, I would suggest them ask your partner, ask your shoulder partner. If they don't know, ask your table group, ask another student that's maybe finished. So not everything has to come directly to me. And also, if I get, let's say the exit slip, they don't understand why or why not he was successful. If it's only a small group, then the next day during win time, for example, or maybe social studies when they're doing the independent practice, I can pull that small group of students and work on this exit slip or the couple problems on the notebook page. And I can be like, hey, I realized you guys got this wrong. Can you kind of explain to me what you were thinking? Can I help you out? And not tell them the answer, but lead them to the right answer that they need to know to get it more correct and feel more confident about their learning. And again, if it was the whole class missing something, then I would have to reteach that and be like, whoa, I didn't say something clearly. Let's go over and talk about that again. Of course, the skit and rap will also be great feedback for me because that's where they get to be creative. They get to make up what they want and just kind of show me what they know. And that'll be really useful to know kind of how they're doing. As far as grouping students, when we're on the carpet, they'll just all be down there. I'll definitely make suggestions if I notice some students are talking a lot, or if a student is sitting next to someone that they usually talk to and get distracted by. I know I made a statement when I was teaching my lesson, but if you're sitting next to someone where you're going to be distracted, move now before the lesson starts, so I don't have to move you later so that you're not distracted and you miss something. So that's mainly just be wise with your seating choice on the carpet. And then when they're doing the notebook page, they'll already have assigned shoulder partners. And that's just with their table group and the shoulder partner of the table group. For my struggling readers and writers, for example, Claudia, maybe Javon or Wesley, Claudia at table 2 will be sitting next to Kylie, and she has the support of Megan and Araya. So that would be just me stopping over at table 2 and being like, hey guys, make sure Claudia's on top and she knows what to do. Give her a little bit of assistance. Also, Tanner sits with Wesley so he can, and Kaysen has an island right by him. So Tanner can kind of help motivate and lead to Kaysen and Wesley and make sure they're on the right track. And then table 1 with Javon. Javon is a pretty decent reader. He just gets distracted sometimes. So that would be me going back to that table often, making sure the whole table is staying on track, and then encouraging them to help him and be supportive in the needs. Like read it together, talk about it together, and then write it down together. And again, with grouping students for my higher level students, just making sure to go into them, give them additional information if they need it, make sure they're doing well on the notebook pages, ask them those different questions, just so I can keep an eye on both levels of my class. As for teacher content of knowledge, I've researched quite a lot, and I mentioned there were a couple websites on here that I looked at just to get more information about them. My biggest struggles with this was taking all of the information of Jean Ribault and narrowing it down to just fit the standards about the motives, activities, and accomplishments, because it's a pretty interesting story and there's so much that I could tell them, but they really just need to know a little bit. So my biggest thing was adding to the story to make it interesting, but slimming it down a lot to make it concise and short that they can actually remember it. Kind of like the less is more thing. Just getting those key details. Teacher knowledge of students is my next topic. And I kind of talked about this in grouping students, but just being aware of like Claudia, Javon, Wesley, Kaysen, maybe Miles, they might need some extra assistance, either with just reading it and the academic side, or also just behavior. Are they paying attention? Are they not distracted? Give them that nudge on the shoulder, be like, hey, you working good? Do you need some help? Can I help you out? Or, give them that challenge. When I come back around, I want to see you do question 3 and finish that up. Just kind of doing that. And then again, for my higher level students, giving them additional information. And also for my middle level students, making sure I don't ignore them, but keep circulating around the room, making sure everyone is doing good. And they're staying on top of the work. For different types of thinking, the students do research-based thinking for their, it's pretty low level, but it's still research-based thinking for the notebook page, because we talked about the story, we went over the PowerPoint, there's this little information that they have to go, and they need to take all that information and plot it down on this piece of paper and make sure it's all there like they need. And then the exit slip, of course, is also, it's research. They had to look it up, they had to learn it, but now they have to recall it too, so that's a little bit higher level. And the same thing with the activities, but this is a lot of creative thinking, like especially the rap. Just coming up with like a fun, catchy tune that they can talk about each explorer, and then if they decide to do the timeline, coming up with different pictures, coming up with the key points that were most important, and also for the skit, if they're doing a skit, make sure the people are divided out and each person has a job, make sure they tell the story correctly. So a lot of that, they have to know the information, and then they get to split it out in a more creative way that I think they'll really enjoy. Problem solving, we kind of did this at the beginning while I had them think of a problem they had, and they talked about, they discussed a different problem they had and perhaps how they could solve it, or just what they were doing with that. But then again, I think I touched base on it during the lesson when I was talking about Jean Ribault having to decide to stay or to leave to go back to France, and like why he didn't come back to France, and which men would go and which men would stay. And I talked about different problem solving also when like the remaining men built the boat and were sailing back to France, and they had like no food and like had to eat their shoes. So I think just in this lesson particularly, putting my students into the Frenchmen's shoes and being like, what would you do? What would you do differently? What would you do the same? How do you think they did? If you were Jean Ribault, what would you do? And just kind of definitely putting them in those shoes and letting them think about it from a different perspective than just reading it and moving on. And then also, like, for the exit slip, they need to give me a couple reasons, like 2 to 3 sentences for why or why not it was successful. So there they just need to recall the information and talk about it. Instructional plans, I have them right over here. I tried pretty hard to make sure they were aligned to the standards. So we were just talking about the motives, activities, and accomplishments, and getting that key details concise, clear, making it interesting without, again, going too crazy and too far. I have everything pretty much written out here that I wrote. I tried to start off with just a question, get the students thinking, get their brains moving, and then we moved into the story so they were able to listen, process it a little bit, look at the pictures, ask questions or make comments if they needed, and then later on in the lesson when they did the independent practice, they were actually able to put their thoughts into words and write it down. The activity, they had to do that creatively, and then of course the exit slip, they had to recall what they learned and go even further with that. For student work, as you know, they had to work on their notebook page, their map. If they started the activity, they would have to do that, and then also their exit slip. So there were quite a lot of hands-on writing things that the students had to do. They could look at the PowerPoint. So I tried to give them lots of ways to show their knowledge. So even if they messed a couple questions on the exit slip, I can, if they messed a question up on the notebook page, I can look at their exit slip. Or I can look at their activity and just kind of see, like, is this a pattern? Did they just make a simple mistake? Do we need to reteach something? And just get a better idea of how they're working. I tried to connect to prior knowledge. And with this, with my activity, I made my activities about Hernando de Soto, so they didn't like copy it straight about Jean Ribault, so it was a little bit different. So that was going back to previous knowledge. Then I also mentioned about the God, Glory, and Gold, which we learned in our first lesson on explorers, and just like making those connections between explorers, France, Spain, the different relationships they had. And then I tried to make connections to their personal life in my hook, where they talked about a decision that they had to make when two things were really, when they had two choices and they couldn't decide which one. For my assessment, again, I had the map, the exit slip, the notebook page, the activities. So I had lots of different ways to see how they were doing, to get written feedback from them. Also, just because I would be in a class with them for like, I think the whole time is like 30 to 45 minutes, I'd be able to see from the questions, the comments, the faces, the actions, how they were doing. I can always do a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways, depending on, when I'm teaching my mini lesson. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Also, another thing I can do when I'm teaching my mini lesson, if students still have questions, I can have them stay on the carpet while other students go start working on whatever they need on their notebook page. So I wanted to make sure all that my information that I was getting from the students comes from the standard, so that I wasn't assessing random information that they didn't really need to know. And they wrote out short answers. They had a yes or no problem. They did creative thinking. So my students had lots of different ways to express their ideas. For expectations, I tried to make my expectations really clear because I know that's a struggle for me in my class. So at the beginning of my mini lesson, when I was handing out the papers, the social weekly, I was like, hey guys, we're on the carpet. When I'm talking, you need to be listening. Make sure you raise your hand if you have a question. Don't call out. Sit by a partner that you can read with and behave. When I'm reading, everyone needs to be reading along, being respectful to me and your classmates. And then, of course, when they're doing their notebook pages, I wanted them to be working together, cooperating, reading, taking turns reading, talking about it, deciding what they're going to write down. So I tried to make the expectations as clear as I could, so that students didn't have any confusion on there. And of course, students are going to make mistakes, and that's normal. So that's one way I would encourage definitely writing a pencil. So if you do make a mistake, we can just erase it out, don't worry about it, and start over. Or just think of a different way we can say it, or use what you wrote to do something different. So I wanted them to know that if they do mess up, it's okay, we can always fix it. And sometimes even when we make mistakes, that's good because it helps us remember the correct answer even better. So just helping students understand that not everything has to be perfect all the time. And for my example, for my exit slip, I wrote like an exemplar, perfect answer or whatever. But I don't expect them to have that. I want them to tell me what they know. I just want them to tell me what they know. Then for managing student behavior, I couldn't really do this because I didn't have students, but to reward good behavior, I would give out Skittles or little bits of candy, gold, or table points for tables that were doing good. And I would do this if students are on the carpet, sitting quietly, doing what they're supposed to be doing, or at their desks, wherever, if they're following directions, if they answer a question correctly, if the whole table is working together and being really cooperative. Definitely giving them that positive feedback. And then also just a lot of verbal feedback. Like, oh, I see you're sitting on the carpet really nicely. I appreciate that behavior. Oh, you were listening to me the whole time, and I love to see your eyes and have your ears open to that. Or you've been working on your notebook pages super hard. I love all the detail you've added in. Just giving them lots of verbal and affirmation to help encourage that good behavior. Of course, I also would have to use negative punishments, like giving students recess time, silent lunch, or sending them to like Miss Farrell or Miss Holmes's room. I would want to give them like one warning, and if they don't follow through, if they don't listen to the warning and they still misbehave, go ahead and write their name up right away so they know I mean business and I don't accept or tolerate that kind of misbehavior in my class. If they're misbehaving on the carpet, I can have them move to a different spot so they're not with their friends, or send them back to their desks or the kidney table so that they're separated, not distracted, and they can pay attention better. And then if there's a point in the lesson when maybe everyone's frustrated, or got lots of energy, don't really know what to do, a little bit confused, I can always ring the chimes, gather their attention, do some jumping jacks, play a quick game of Simon Says, kind of get everyone to reset, refocus, get some of that energy out, get some positive vibes going, and then quickly dismiss them back to what they were doing. And hopefully that would change the atmosphere in the room, which would be really good. And that kind of ties into environment, just making sure I have that lot of positive behavior, positive interactions between the students and myself. In this lesson, they'll be doing whole group with the mini lesson. They'll be doing partner groups or small groups with the notebook page and the map and the activity. And then for the exit slip, they'll be working independently. So they'll have lots of time to interact and talk throughout the lesson, and I don't mind if they're talking at all. I would just want to make sure it's directed towards the lesson, exit slip, the notebook pages, explorers, social studies, keeping it on task. I would love, especially the activities when they're done with them, to put them up on the wall, either in the classroom or in the hallway. And I would encourage the students to really decorate and go all out when they make the wrap and like timeline, include pictures, use different colors, lots of neat handwriting, make it look professional. And then for the students that have a skit, I would love to videotape it when they present their skit to the class. And then I can put that online and make a QR code and put the QR code in the hallway and maybe a picture of them doing it. And so people can scan the QR code and see what the class is doing. And I think that'll just help the students feel really proud of their work and feel motivated to get it done. And it's just cool to have around the classroom. And then also, the student supplies, they have supplies just at their table. And then they also, like, supplies at their tables like whiteboard markers, pencils, erasers, maybe glue stick, and then everything else is on the counter. So they know exactly where it is and they know where to get it. And I also have like my paper passer and materials manager. So like if everyone needs a glue stick, instead of everyone rushing towards the counter, I can be like, hey,